Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust or a 1031 exchange is an amazing way for you to create and preserve more wealth when exiting highly appreciated assets such as a business, cryptocurrency, investment real estate, primary homes. So you can preserve that capital somewhere between 25 and 50% of the gain, and then you can create some more wealth on your terms, on your timing. For those who don't know me, my name is Brett Swarts. I'm one of the hosts of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. And each episode, we're joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and leadership minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. We're also streaming on expert CRE secrets as well. I'm excited about our next guest. He is out of Illinois, the Chicago area. And he first worked at Dow Chemical, a Fortune 50 company, rolling out a flagship product estimated to gross $1 billion in global revenues. And then at 23, he left the 9-to-5 world and started investing in residential real estate by acquiring residential rentals and renovating and selling rental properties. He then went on to build a multifamily rental portfolio spanning in the Midwest, and so much more. And now he's focused on self-storage, mostly in kind of the Midwest and the Southeast. Please welcome to the show with me, Fernando, and I'll let Fernando pronounce his last name. Fernando, how are we doing?
Good. It's Angelucci, Fernando Angelucci. Thanks for having me on the show, Brett.
Absolutely. And for now, for those who get to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah. So when I was 16 years old, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it kind of changed the trajectory of my life. I'm the son of two immigrants, so they kind of had the old school American dream kind of set for me, which was go to school, get good grades, go work at a Fortune 500 company, and then retire in 40 years with a pension. Obviously, that's not really the game plan anymore. So went on to start investing in real estate, started with single families, then multifamilies. And then in 2016, I thought the market was going to crash in 2018. So started unwinding my entire multifamily portfolio, looking for something that was going to be a little bit more recession resilient. And from there, decided to get involved in self-storage. So from that point on, we bought our first facility in August of 2018. And as of this recording, March 2023, we've done over 220 million in self-storage to date.
Excellent. Fantastic. Actually love that that intro here. Fernando, I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So I'm curious, go back to the younger days or even right now. What do you feel like the one or two gifts you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, I think empathy is one of the most important skill sets that someone can learn. It is a gift, but you also have to work at it. And once you're able to really put yourself in other people's shoes and experience what they're going through, it makes it a lot easier to go through life, not only on the negotiation side, but in personal relationships, things of that nature. The second piece is with self-storage. It is an extremely localized business. We pull the majority of our clients and customers from a 3 to 5 mile radius around our facilities. So as a portion of our charitable givings, we always focus on the local community, giving back. We rely on our managers to find things and causes that make sense to the local community. And that could be, animal shelters, battered women shelters, working with local police departments for toy drives or back to school kind of events where we buy backpacks and fill them with school supplies, give them to the kids. So we've done a bunch of things, little league teams, hockey teams, you name it.
Awesome. So empathy, putting yourself in other people's shoes, and as well as just giving back to local communities for those that are in need and a chance to help them out. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. So let's dive into the topic at hand with all those two things in mind, which is investing in self-storage. And by the way, if you want to learn more about Fernando, you can go to ssse.com. That's SSSE.com, or just call him. He's at 630-408-8090, 630-408-8090. So Fernando, what's the number one secret to investing in self-storage?
Yeah, what people don't realize about self-storage is that it has asymmetric risk return profile. So if you look at the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts, they did a study that started in 1994 to present, and they saw that over that period of time across different real estate assets or different asset classes, you had things like the S&P 500 returning between 7 to 8%. Multifamily doing a little bit better at about 13% average annual return. And then self-storage all the way at the top with 17.4% return. Now that 4% between multifamily and self-storage may not seem like a lot, but you got to realize that compound interest is at play. So if you had $100,000 during that study period, the S&P 500 would return about $500,000, apartments about 1.7, 1.8 million, but self-storage would return about $4 to $4.1 million. So most people say, well, Fernando, if the returns are that high, that must mean the risk is also high as well. And that isn't the case. So, if you look at 2007 to 2009, the S&P dropped 22%. Multifamily dropped about 7%, but self-storage only dropped about 3.5%. And then if you go to something a little bit more fresh in our minds, during the pandemic, according to TREP, which is a commercial mortgage-backed research facility firm, they found that of the 1,700 CMBS loans that were made to self-storage investors, in the first 3 quarters of the pandemic, only 3 were more than 3 days delinquent. That's a 0.17% delinquency rate. During that same time, multifamily was defaulting at a rate of 1,800% higher, 18 times the default rate of self-storage.
Wow. So those are some great stats. Let me see if I can capture that. So it's the asymmetric return / risk pendulum, if you will. And self-storage is 17% during the study period, which is about 4% higher than multifamily, which multifamily is about 13, which is about maybe double or so or close to that from the stock market. And on top of that, though, the vacancy or lack of massive people just taking all their stuff and actually just, organizing it or whatever, however else they would do stuff with self-storage, right? They actually didn't get out. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's fair. And, one of the easiest reasons why I decided to switch from habitation-based real estate, where someone lives in my asset, to non-habitation-based real estate like self-storage is the difference in the guiding laws, right? So you move from landlord-tenant law or eviction law to lien or property law. So, when I was investing in multifamily, especially in Chicago, where the laws are pretty lenient towards the tenants, there was times where we did everything right and it still took us 8 months to get a tenant out of our unit. And then it'd cause a bunch of damage and we couldn't get that money back. Whereas with self-storage, when someone places their possessions into my facility, I automatically get a lien against those possessions. So within 5 days of non-payment, I can overlock their unit and tell them, hey, it's overlocked. If you don't pay within the next 45 days, we're going to auction off your materials. And if they still don't pay, we send them to auction. And within 45 to 60 days, I have a new paying tenant in that unit. I don't have to deal with eviction courts. It's very easy. It's clean. It's fast.
Wow, that's amazing. Because I'm from California, so I feel the pain, brother, man. It seems like, these states have become so, let's say, I don't even say tenant friendly. I think they're just against the landlords, right?
Right.
And I remember my dad, we grew up building houses in the Bay Area and having rentals our entire lives and all of this stuff. And he says, Brett, you believe it, Brett? They actually wanted you to do business in California years ago, right? They were actually for you and the business owner. And you're like, you felt like the inspector who came out and looked at the things. We're looking to make it move. Now it's just anything they can to stop and delay, and it's a disaster. In fact, I was talking with one of the top commercial brokers in Sacramento just 10 minutes before we got on this call, and he was talking about this Dutch brothers that he was putting together with the city. This has to do with like development stuff, but it kind of ties into the overall kind of nature of what's happening right now. And he goes, they spent $120,000 with this architect over like a year period of time to design and get everything right. And then the city person said, no, I have something better. And they get on this call, and the call they get on, Fernando, the guy has the drive-through. He has the passenger side it's facing the drive-through instead of the driver's side. And they're like, wait, so we're spending all of this time and energy and money, and this guy wants to change it to this. And they asked the guy, like, hey, do you realize that you have it on the passenger side, not on the drive side? And he says, well, what's wrong with that? And it's like, it's like the universe is like split from the time that business was like exciting and fun and really great to do in these states that are, like an Illinois, like in New York, New Jersey, California, to the opposite. And that has gone all the way down to, especially for multifamily, I couldn't agree with you more. So any thoughts on any of that, Fernando?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an increasing trend that I noticed going across the United States, both from your side of the world, California moving east and New York moving west, and me in the middle in Chicago, is that government is getting involved in private industry. They're forcing their way into the rental business. I mean, look at COVID. They basically, with in so many words, had a blanket statement across the entire United States that said, hey, you don't have to pay your rent, and we're going to protect you from being evicted. But at the same time, they didn't tell the landlords that they could stop paying their property taxes or their mortgages. So look at that. That's an assault on capitalism. It's also an assault on, private rights and private property. I think that's ridiculous and an overreach. So as soon as I started seeing these trends, rent control, et cetera, which you guys have a ton of, restrictions on height of buildings when you're developing, I was like, I need to get out of this industry and get into one that is more friendly to the person that's actually taking all the risks, putting up all the capital, trying to develop, this land that makes basically no tax revenue for the municipalities into something that produces a ton of tax revenue, and actually be thanked for doing that, as opposed to being treated like I'm some villain in an old school Western,
100%. I could agree with you more. And it's the failure of leadership within the government. They absolutely have failed us. And it seems to only be getting worse. It seems like there's not an accountability. There's not any real transparency. And they're just, and in California, for example, Gavin Newsom was potentially going to be, recalled, right? And he didn't. And it seemed like he just doubled down on all of this stuff. And it's just like, so we're unsubscribing from California in a lot of ways. In fact, we're spending most of our, about 51% of our time in St. Augustine, Florida now, as a part of this whole thing. It's just really sad to see. Still love California for a lot of things, family, the topography, all of the things to do, amazing place. But it's very hard to continue to pay huge taxes to a place where they just seem to waste it away, and they don't really seem to care. And it seems to just be, going the opposite way at a faster pace, which, but we could go on that for a while. This isn't the political show, but this is, that's a part of it, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're going to solve these major problems, create more jobs, right, which are going to actually create more housing and create more tax revenue, we've got to, we have to have a government that's for us and doesn't feel like it's against the entrepreneur and the developer. That being said, let's move into the number 3 secret. So you have habitation, you have the changing of just, going from helping with people with the government that's getting in the way. And we also have just the actual returns, which are even better than multifamily from what you're saying. So what's the number 3 secret to investing into self-storage?
Well, so, the name of your podcast is very relevant here. We have 3 avenues in our kind of our investing thesis. So the first is to buy existing self-storage facilities from mom and pop operators, and then to do the value add and wrap them up into 10, 20, 30 property portfolios. The reason we're able to do that, and there's such a opportunity to do so, is because of the fragmentation in this market. Only 18 to 20% of all the facilities owned in the United States are owned by the 6 largest publicly traded REITs. Then the next 100 operators, which I'm a part of, own about 10% of the remaining self-storage facilities. That means that there's 70+% of the facilities in the United States are owned by mom and pop operators that are not running it like a professional business. So there's this opportunity to aggregate and to roll up facilities into larger portfolios, which then gives you cap rate compression and a better return on your investment. The second avenue we had was when we were buying these existing facilities, we realized that once we got over about 50,000 net rentable square feet, the cap rate started plummeting. And then I realized it's because I was competing with these more institutional grade players that they only wanted to deal with a larger facility. So instead of buying those and competing with those guys, I just started to start building them. So this is kind of goes back into our conversation. Where am I building these Class A REIT grade facilities that are institutional in nature, 3-story state-of-the-art technology? I'm not building them in areas where population is declining, like California, New York, New Jersey, Chicago. I'm building them in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, right? Georgia, all these areas where we're seeing massive population growth, massive job growth, and diversity. So that is the second avenue, is building these, call it, total cost 16 to $19 million projects, and then selling them or refinancing them in the $25 to $27 million range. Now, that's a huge capital gain to experience, right? Over a 5-year period, going from 16 to 25 million. So what do? Well, we employ a strategy called cost segregation, where we get our cost segregation engineers involved. And instead of doing it as an afterthought, what we actually do is we bring them to the table with our architect and we say, how do we design this building to maximize the benefit of the cost segregation study in order to shift a lot of that capital gain into that 5, 7, and 15-year property bucket? And so on a lot of our investments, our investors are making anywhere between 1 to 2x their initial investment back just in year one operating losses because of that cost segregation when we place the asset into service. Now, that was all good and fine until the pandemic hit. And then we started seeing issues with pricing volatility on supplies, supply chain issues where even if I was willing to pay 500% for the cost of a material, I couldn't get it to my site in time. So that's when we shifted to our third and final strategy, which is buying big box retail stores that have been dormant for a few years and then converting those into self-storage facilities that are in the Class A REIT grade space. And that allowed us to employ a second piece of that strategy, which is called partial asset disposition. So not only did we get the first hit on that, that cost segregation study from disposing of an asset that has value, but then once we built out the storage facility inside of that asset, we got to do a second hit for putting the facility in service and returning even more passive losses through depreciation to our investors.
Wow, that's amazing, Fernando. You can learn more about Fernando by going to sse.com or calling him at 630-408-8090. Absolutely love it. Let's geek out here for a minute. This is the place we're going to spend some time. So your third part of the secret for investing in self-storage is really in the structuring and the options for your investors to be able to not only maximize as much as you can cash flow, but also the tax flow, right? The tax flow being through cost segregation and accelerated depreciation, and literally designing the assets in a way with your architect that's going to increase the ability to take even more losses up front or quicker, or even just more efficiently, if what I'm hearing you, right? Which is amazing, right? So that's one part of the strategy. The other part is to build big box retail or buy existing retail that's going out, like the Amazon effect, which is taking a lot of people out, and it's sitting there, and a lot of the bones and utilities and things are in place, right? And parking's in place, right? And you're able to convert that so smart to self-storage. And then you not only get the depreciation new schedule on that as you're buying it, but as you convert it, you're going to get even more stuff to cost seg and get some passive losses. How am I doing so far on that strategy before I touch on the other two?
Yeah, you're doing great. And one piece that I'll add is because we're buying the existing big box and it's already in place, I'm able to drop my construction timeline by about 25 to 33%. So moving from a 12 to 18 month build out where, you can't take that bonus depreciation until the asset is put into service. So if all of a sudden I could shrink that from 12 to 14 months to 6 to 8 months, my investors get to take those losses faster. And then in addition to that, because the structure of the envelope is already up, we're able to drop our total project cost from say $110, $120 a foot total project cost down to 60 to 80 bucks a foot total project cost, because we don't have to pay for all the concrete, all the steel, the roofing materials, the MEP, because it's already in there and we're able to retrofit. And storage, because it doesn't require a lot of energy, if you will, we're able to use those existing structures or even downgrade the electrical, the mechanical, the plumbing to get us, fast to the end line faster and at a cheaper cost.
Amazing. Absolutely love it. And so I want to touch on the other two too. You're buying existing from mom and pops. You're taking advantage of the fragmented nature of this, where it's mostly not professionally run by the 100 operators, which you're a part of, by that, which is really important, because you always, if you're investing with someone like Fernando and was listening, you want to make sure that they have a proven track record. They're in it full time. They are business professionals who are helping to build wealth with you, with themselves, with their family, friends, partners, clients, investors. And you want to make sure that they're doing it on a professional level. The 70% is a huge opportunity to capture mom and pops, who are a lot of them are baby boomers, by the way, who are looking to retire, looking to diversify, and looking to just, they've built their wealth and they're ready to move. And it's part of the 84 trillion, by the way, that's passing from their generation to the next generation in the next 20 years, known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. And they've built their wealth and now they want to diversify, but they can feel trapped by the capital gains tax. That's part of where we come in as well. They can unlock a plan using what's called the Deferred Sales Trust as a way to not only defer the capital gains tax, but then they can turn around and invest with someone like a Fernando. Now, Fernando also might say, look, I've got a project for you here that I'm building that you could roll it in the same year. And there's a thing called bonus depreciation, which right now it's 80% bonus. Last year was 100. It's not quite as great, but still it could maybe offset a lot of that gain or a lot of that cap gains tax by providing losses in the same year. So check with your CPA to get on that. But the neat part is you want to not only have a tax flow mindset, but you also want to build a team as well as build the strategy or strategies that's going to help you. Because guess what? The government has a spending problem, which means we all have a tax problem. So you're going to want to know the different strategies you have, and it can involve multiple things. So Fernando, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, actually, you touched on some really important strategies for us, especially now that interest rates have almost doubled in the last 12 months. So sellers, they're usually 12 months in the past on valuation, and buyers are 12 months in the future on valuation. And when there's this rapid change in interest rate, you end up being really far apart between the bid-ask spread, right? So one of the things we've been doing is saying, okay, let's get creative here and find out ways that I can offer value to you, even if you don't decide to go with my offer. So one of the things I say is, hey, I'm willing to pay your price, but I need terms when that price was feasible. So how about you become the bank for me? We'll structure it in a way that instead of you getting this giant capital gains hit year one, we have some type of installment sale that allows you to parse it out over time. Or if you don't want to do something like that, why don't you actually come in as a partner? So make a joint venture. And then on the back end, since I don't have to put all this capital up front, on the back end, I will assign all of my bonus depreciation to your portion of the sale so that your net effective is zero tax on that transfer of ownership.
So creative and so smart. Rewind that if you didn't quite catch it all, but essentially it's not just price, it's also terms. And so you can do a traditional installment sale where the seller can be the bank for you as the buyer, Fernando as the buyer. They still get their price, but perhaps Fernando negotiates a lower interest rate, probably does, right? Makes sense. Right. But at the same time, the seller is able to defer that capital gains tax that they would have incurred, and or become a partner, right? Where as we're improving this asset, or be a partner in another deal as well, right? With that capital, right. He's able to assign or attribute or however you would do that, more depreciation to offset your taxes. And so that is so powerful, so amazing. And I'm so glad that you're so creative. I'm curious, Fernando, how did you become so creative in these deals? What's been your secret to figuring this stuff out?
Yeah, I think it's a couple pieces. So, number one goes back to being empathetic and really listening. So instead of just waiting to respond, you actually shutting your mouth and listening to what the needs of the seller is. Maybe he doesn't need all that cash right now. Maybe the reason he's selling is because he wants to travel around the world. Well, okay, what's your annual travel budget? Let's structure the payments so that it hits that. Or maybe you have a grandchild that you want to pay for their college tuition. Well, you don't have to pay all 4 years of college day one. Why don't we structure the payments in a way where it aligns with the tuition payments that are due? The second piece is just the volume of deals that we look at each week and that we negotiate. We're looking at close to 15 deals to 20 deals per week on the self-storage front. And just being able to go through so many of these scenarios, that repetition, you start to learn what works, what doesn't work. And then the last piece is, I've always been someone that thinks you need to be a lifelong learner and constantly try to be improving yourself. So listening to podcasts like yours, learning about these strategies that no one teaches you in school. And the only way to get this information is to go out and listen to Brett or to read books on how to structure things in a more creative way. Go to seminars that all they talk about are, deferred installment sales or structured installment sales, DSTs, all these 1031s, all these structures that these sellers may not be aware of. And then again, just being, yes, you're the buyer, you want to be the buyer, but you should first lead with contribution and try to add value to them so that if you have a competing offer that may be the same as a competitor, they say, well, I'm going to go with Fernando because he showed me a way to save money, or he showed me a way that I can save on taxes, what have you.
100%. By the way, you can learn more about Fernando by going to sse.com. That's triple S, the letter E.com, or just call him 630-408-8090, 630-408-8090. I want to geek out with you a little bit more, Fernando. You ready? So
Yeah,
since you had a creative mind here, especially for the tax stuff. So this is what we're doing too. So we're doing something where we help people exit not only investment real estate. So most commercial real estate syndicators we work with, they're focused on helping people with their investment real estate, either through like a tick structure 1031 or just sell, cost seg, right? And it's all within the commercial real estate world, which is what I grew up in, which is what I love and you love and all that stuff. But guess what? We're the other there's about 50% of all net worth, let me back up. 50% of the total assets in America are tied to high-end primary homes, businesses, private equity, and then it's commercial real estate, right? Those are all illiquid assets. It's part of the largest transfer for the baby boomers. Now, 2 of those do not qualify for a 1031. In fact, there's even a couple more: public and private stock, cryptocurrency. Okay. Of course, primary homes don't. They don't qualify for a 1031. Whereas the deferred sales trust is part of why we love it. We think it's transformational because it does. We've done it with cryptocurrency. We've done it with business sales. We've done it with car washes. We've done it with, we've saved failed 1031 exchanges where people maybe call you, Fernando. They're like, hey, I'm running out of time. And you may or may not have that cost seg deal lined up. You may or may not have a tick structure lined up. And now they can use the deferred sales trust to defer the tax. Then they can turn around and invest with you. All tax deferred. But here's the coolest part about all of this, Fernando. You get a brand new depreciation schedule. Okay, think about that. Part of a tax flow strategy is having more depreciation, but when you do a 1031, your old depreciation schedule travels, right? Now, if you do the cost seg and you just take the cash and you fail the 1031, by default, you're going to get a new depreciation schedule on the next investment, right? So it's this tax flow game, but just the thought of being able to exit crypto and businesses and still be able to flood into, I think it's going to help solve the housing crisis. I think this is the number one way. You've got to, it's kind of like a reverse opportunity zone if you think about it, right? Opportunity zones basically say, hey, sell your big asset, sell your crypto, sell your whatever, put it into these opportunity zones to develop these projects. And over a period of time, you'll get tax-free money, if you hold it more than 10 years. And in the beginning, you get some tax deferral. The deferred sales trust, we're doing this installment sale up front, but then we're able to say there's a way we structure it to give you a new depreciation schedule, which you can do the cost seg on right now. So is this over your head, Fernando, or how are you taking it? Because I know it's a little bit more complex than most of our shows.
No, this is, I geek out over this. I mean, in college, I was reading books on taxes when my friends were, making fun of me because I didn't want to go out and drink on a Friday night. So this is the type of stuff I love. Another strategy that we use specifically in the self-storage space, because you touched on a piece that is tough for a lot of people, is that commercial real estate is illiquid, right? So how do you transfer that into a liquid asset without a massive tax hit? So one option is the deferred sales trust. Another option that we have specifically in the self-storage realm is when we build up these larger portfolios and we exit to, say, a publicly traded REIT, one of the things we could do is, instead of taking all of that cash or a portion of that cash, we can actually take operator unit shares in exchange, which now means we own a part of that publicly traded REIT. It's a tax favorable transfer. And now you have a liquid asset that if you want to liquidate within 30 seconds, you can. You can hold it for the really great dividends that they pay out long term. It's up to you.
That's amazing. And so is that like the 721 exchange? Is that what you're referring to? Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. That's really cool, right? The 721 is really cool. I think the counter would be optimal timing, right? And now that you can't get out of that, but I would also wonder when you get out of that, and now we can do public and private stock, right? Public or private stock. If it's, by the way, our minimum is $1 million net proceeds, $1 million gain, so it's got to be big enough. So it wouldn't be pieces there. But if I'm hearing you, you're saying, hey, you can get out in small pieces over time, smaller shares, right? So if you say $10 million asset, you would have paid $4 million of tax. You do the 721 exchange up into the up REIT, and then you slowly could take some parts to pay some tax Is that what you're saying, Fernando?
Yeah, and actually, so these types of transactions are a little bit larger dollar figures. So when we target an exit to a REIT, they're typically wanting to stroke a large check because the amount of underwriting it takes to buy one deal at $20 million versus, call it 20 deals at $20 million a piece is more worth their time. So these are, typically on the low end, $100 million sales up to $200-300 million sales. So our, family offices, RIAs, wealth managers, this is one of the things that they really like, is that they don't have to take all of that in cash. If it's a REIT that they really like say a Public Storage or a Life Storage, they can take some of that 721 as opposed to taking all of that in cash.
Nice. Now, my question would be, when they do exit, let's say that position, it's $300 million, but someone has a $5 million. If they're exiting in that million, if they'd want to use the DST to still defer the tax and still have some flexibility to do what they want with the capital, whether they're developing their own deal or diversifying back into one of your other deals. So I'd like to maybe geek out with you another time and do like a full circle of like the different options that they could go down, the different trees here. That being said, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, Fernando, if you go back to your 25-year-old self with the one golden nugget, make sure to tell yourself to do.
Again, it's be compassionate, start with, I've always been somebody that has approached the world with a abundance mentality, but it isn't just lip service. Truly, when your goal is to help others, it comes back 100-fold.
Perfect. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
You're putting me on the spot. So I am an avid reader. My Audible account has over 300 books already in it. Depending on what their needs are, I usually recommend one of the following. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, which talks about how to learn and employ tactical empathy. If you're a business owner, Traction by Gino Wickman teaches you how to set up an entrepreneur operating system to make sure that your business is on the right path to growth. And if you're somebody that feels a little bit lost, or maybe you're a business owner that is super successful, but kind of feels like they're trapped by their job, I recommend Vagabonding, the Forgotten Art of Long-Term World Travel by Rolf Potts.
Amazing. Question number 3, what are you most curious about right now?
I love to study macroeconomics. So I think we're in a very interesting time period in our country. Ray Dalio has this book called The Changing World Order. I'm thinking that maybe in my lifetime, the dollar will lose, world reserve status. And if that's the case, what are options to preserve wealth in a shifting of power, global power?
Fascinating. Yeah, I love Ray Dalio. This book, Principles, is around here. I've been reading to my kids, the kids version, by the way, and It's so rich. It's so good. Second to last question, or let's make last questions because we're out of time. After all your success, Fernando, and everything, all the people you've helped, all the business you've built, and all the wealth and the good that you've done with the wealth, I'm curious, what's the number one practice or habit that you try to practice to help you stay centered in your values and then stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new heights?
Meditation. Every morning, I set aside 10 to 20 minutes. It kind of focuses me. It shuts out all the anxiety and the got a last minute second thing to do. It makes me focus on the one thing that needs to be done throughout that day. And it also helps me practice gratitude.
Amazing. Fernando, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts you've been given to practice empathy and help people really care about them. And then take the gift of self-storage and really investing in just the mindset of abundance and helping people with their wealth. Keep doing that. For people who want to get in touch with you, Fernando, would you share one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. So if you're more passive, you can go to ssse.com. If you're someone that wants to be a little bit more aggressive in reaching out, my personal cell phone number is area code 630-408-8090.
Thank you, Fernando. And I want to thank all of our listeners for listening to an episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. Hey, you learned a lot here. I would rewind this one and play it over because your tax flow game and strategy and mindset is as important as your cash flow and your wealth building mindset. And you got to have both. And we want to encourage you to build that team. We would love the opportunity to be a part of that team. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can search Also on YouTube, we talk about the difference between the 1031 exchange and the deferred sales trust and looking at what option is best for you. You can also check out the new book we just released. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. We have people like Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank and a number of other commercial real estate operators, syndicators that are in the book as well. So thank you. I appreciate everyone's support out there, and we look forward to talking to you soon. And